slightly intensify a word when it, at the end of the line, it's carrying over the thought into the next line.
Okay.
You drop the word come.
Okay.
Too seldom is the shadow of what must come. No. Too seldom is the shadow of what must come cast in an instant. Too seldom is that shadow cast in an instant. See? Which feels the shock, but seldom in the few who give answer, that mighty process of that cosmic will communicates its image to our sight. And then the culmination, identifying the world's mind with ours. So let's try it again and see if you can make sense of it to me. I'm the listener.
Too seldom is the shadow of what must come cast in a...
You dropped come again.
Okay.
Of what must come, cast in an instant.
Okay.
The shadow of what must come. Okay.
Too seldom is the shadow of what must come cast in an instant on the secret sense, which feels the shock of the invisible, and seldom in the few who answer give.
Okay, sorry, but which feels the shock of the invisible. Invisible is so important here. You swallowed it again.
Okay.
And then you didn't carry over, and seldom in the few who answer give.
Okay.
Try to make it a story for me. What Sri Aurobindo is trying to tell us here is that this shadow, which we don't know what it is yet, of what must come, that is cast somehow in an instant on the secret sense, that sense that's within us, which feels the shock of the invisible, but seldom in the few who give answer, that mighty process of the cosmic will communicates its image to our sight, and therefore identifies the world's mind with ours. Okay, from the beginning.
Too seldom is the shadow of what must come. It's again dropping for me. I can hear that
But
now.
not so much that time.
Okay. Too seldom is the shadow of what must come, cast in an instant on the secret sense, which feels the shock of the invisible, and seldom in the few who answer give. The mighty process of the cosmic will communicates its image to our sight, identifying the world's mind with ours.
It's a little better. But the third line, which feels the shock of the invisible, and then there's a comma. And then we have to sort of pause just very briefly, because then we have to say, and seldom in the few who answer give. So it's not which feels the shock of the invisible and seldom in the few. No, which feels the shock of the invisible and seldom in the few who answer give. The mighty process of the cosmic will. Okay, last time.
Too seldom is the shadow of what must come, cast in an instant on the secret sense, which feels the shock of the invisible, and seldom in the few who answer give. The mighty process of the cosmic will communicates its image to our sight, identifying the world's mind with ours.
So what I'm feeling is that the words are a little bit too much the same.
Okay. There is no tonality, you mean?
Yeah, communicates is so important, and you read it the same as its image to our sight. So, and then identifying the world's mind with ours, and seldom in the few who answer give. So, I'll read it once for you.
Okay.
Too seldom is the shadow of what must come cast in an instant on the secret sense, which feels the shock of the invisible, and seldom in the few who answer give. The mighty process of the cosmic will communicates its image to our sight. I didn't accent too strongly, but just a little bit on these words. Okay, so we carry on.
Okay.
Now he begins after the sentence, after the period, a continuation of the thought.
Our range is fixed within the crowded arc of what we observe and touch and thought can guess, and rarely dawns the light of the unknown, waking in us the prophet and the seer.
Okay, not too bad, but I would say, and rarely dawns the light of the unknown, waking in us. Our range is fixed within the crowded arc of what we observe and touch and thought can guess. This is materialism. This is empiric knowledge. So our range is fixed within that crowded arc of what we observe and touch and thought can guess. And rarely that light of the unknown, it rarely dawns to wake in us the prophet and the seer. How beautiful. Oh, how powerful. Because we go along with our daily acts. We have our 3 meals a day. We talk with a friend. We read a little bit or something. And it's a crowded arc of what we observe and touch and thought can guess. But rarely that light of the unknown dawns in us, waking the prophet and the seer. You got it now?
Yeah, I got it.
So beautiful, beautiful few lines. So begin with our range.
Our range is fixed within the crowded arc of what we observe and touch and thought can guess, and rarely dawns the light of the unknown, waking in us the prophet and the seer.
Well, the last 2 lines were marvelous, and the first 2 they were dull and flat.
Okay.
You said, and rarely dawns. Oh, it was very, very nice. But you have to all talk about our range and how it's fixed within the crowded arc. It's not just words. It's mantra. Our range is fixed within the crowded arc of what we observe and touch and thought can guess. Okay, again.
Our range is fixed within the crowded arc of what we observe and touch and thought can guess, and rarely dawns the light of the unknown, waking in us the prophet and the seer.
Much, much better. Much better. I would like a little bit more accent on the D of and.
And, okay.
I almost hear and.
Okay.
And.
Yeah.
Good.
Shall
So
I
then,
move on or?
pardon?
Shall I move on or?
Yes, you can
Yeah.
move on. Mhm.
The outward and the immediate are our field. The dead, past in our background and support,
Is our background.
is our background and support.
Now, that first line you read very well. The
Okay.
outward and
The
the immediate are
immediate.
our field. The dead
Dead
past
past.
is our background and support. How is that?
Yeah.
Well, because we just see a little bit ahead
Hmm.
and everything's that is immediate, that's our field.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, it's too hot. I need to cool down. I need to change my clothes. I need to take a bath. I need to go and get food. That's the outward and immediate.
Mm-hmm.
That's our field.
Hmm.
But our past, in fact, our dead past,
Mm-hmm.
is our background and support because we know how to do all of these things. We've done them all our lives.
Mm-hmm.
Very, very fine lines, beautiful. And then he says, mind keeps the soul prisoner. We are slaves to our acts. Wow. So you can start again from the outward.
The outward and the immediate are our field. The dead past is our background and support. Mind keeps the soul prisoner. We are slaves to our acts. We cannot free our gaze to reach wisdom's sun.
Yes, but I didn't like mind keeps the soul. Mind keeps the soul prisoner.
Mind keeps the
It's
soul
uh,
prisoner.
it's the mind that keeps the soul prisoner.
Mhm. The outward and the immediate are our field. The dead past is our background and support. Mind keeps the soul prisoner. We are slaves to our acts.
Excellent.
We cannot free our gaze to reach wisdom's sun.
We cannot free our gaze to
Gaze
reach
to
wisdom.
reach the sun. Inheritor of the brief animal mind. Inheritor of the brief animal mind.
Mind, you want to raise your voice a little bit.
Okay.
Inheritor of the brief animal mind.
Mind. Inheritor of the brief animal mind, man, still a child in nature's mighty hands, in the succession of the moment's lives, or
Lives.
lives, okay, in the succession of the moment lives, to a changing present in his narrow right. His memory stares back at a phantom past. The future flees before him as he moves. He sees imagined garments, not a face, armed with a limited, precarious strength. He saves his fruits of work from adverse chance.
Carry on, you're doing well.
A struggling ignorance is his wisdom's mate. He waits to see the consequences of his acts. He waits to weigh the certitude of its thoughts. I'll read that again. A struggling ignorance in his wisdom's mate
Is wisdom.
is. A struggling ignorance is his wisdom's mate. He waits to see the consequence of his acts. He waits to weigh the certitude of his thoughts. He knows not what he shall achieve or when. He knows not whether at last he shall survive, or end like the mastodon and the sloth, and perish from the earth where he was king.
Very, very good. A big improvement. Why is the big improvement? Because you are feeling it within.
Mm.
You're beginning to feel within what Sri Aurobindo is telling us here. He's speaking to us about man.
Mm-hmm.
And he begins that whole thing, man, who is still a child in
Mm.
nature's mighty hands,
Mm.
lives in the succession of the moments.
Mm-hmm.
When the great Zen teacher was asked, when he said, "I eat, when I eat, I eat, when I sleep, I sleep," and the fellow says, "Well, I do the same thing."
Mm-hmm.
The Zen teacher says, "No. When you eat, you're thinking about this and that and going here and there. And when you sleep, you have disturbed sleep." He
Mm-hmm.
says, "When I eat, I eat." So the big difference here is that man lives in the succession of the moments.
Mm-hmm.
And then our narrow right is only a changing present. That's all it is.
Mm-hmm.
Present that changes is the right that we have.
Mm-hmm.
Because our memory stares back at a phantom past. We're always looking at the past. And Mother tells us, don't look at the past, look only to the future. She wants us to look only to the future.
Mm-hmm.
And then what happens? But the future flies before him as he moves. So we can really only live in the present.
Mm-hmm.
Past is gone, future is not yet with us. But what he says here is that he sees imagined garments, not a face. Oh, that's a beautiful line.
Mm.
What we see in the world is just some fleeting image of things. We don't really see the true picture.
Mm-hmm.
But we are armed. Armed with what? A limited strength. That's very precarious
Mm.
because we save our fruits of work from
Mm.
adverse chance. So we want to save what we do. We build a house, we grow a garden, we try to keep the pests and the animals away from eating our vegetables and things. I'm making it very simple, but that's really true.
Mm-hmm.
Whatever works we do, we want to save those works from adverse chance.
Yeah.
And who is our mate? The struggling
Ignorant.
ignorance is our wisdom's mate. Now, what does man wait to do? They tell you in poetry, never use the same word again and again
Mm.
in continuing lines. And here Sri Aurobindo uses 4 E's.
Mm.
Sri Aurobindo can do anything.
Mm-hmm.
They said Sri Aurobindo didn't write in English, he wrote English.
Mm.
So here's what we do. He waits to see the consequence of his acts. He waits to weigh the truth of his thoughts. He knows not, he knows not
Mm-hmm.
what he shall achieve or when.
Mm. Mm.
What do we know of the next few days?
Yeah.
We don't know.
Yeah.
And we don't even know whether at last we shall survive or end like the mastodon, that great beast
Mm-hmm.
of thousands of years ago,
Mm.
and the sloth. Most of the sloths in the world are dead now.
Mm.
They are known for doing practically nothing. They
Mm-hmm.
so slowly, they eat a little bit and they hang on to a tree.
Mm.
They're going to be extinct also.
Mm.
Because they're of the past.
Mm.
And therefore, man doesn't even know if he shall at last survive
Mm-hmm. That he shall also perish.
and perish from the earth where he
Yeah.
was king.
King.
Because man is king of everything on earth right now.
Mm-hmm.
The only thing that Mother and Sri Aurobindo remind us of is that he's an evolutionary being.
Mm-hmm.
He's not complete.
Mm-hmm.
We're sort of what Sri Aurobindo tells us so powerfully is that, and Mother, the supramental man will be as different from man as man is from the animal. Wow. So this is our problem.
Narad, I think 2 classes ago or something, you mentioned a word for the shifting species. You said a French word, which is
Surom. Surom. Surhome.
S-U-R. Oh, Surhome. Okay.
Now, George Van Vreckum, who was an Orwellian for many years and had a weak heart and died some years ago, he wrote extensively on this intermediate species between man and the Superman. And Mother does tell us that there may be a number of intermediate species before the advent of the Superman. And she even uses the word suram. So what we probably are going to see are beings with much greater understanding, which we already have with us, much greater inner powers, telepathy, for example, telekinesis, all of these things that should be ours, but we left them in our urge towards becoming man. We lost the vision of the eagle. Can see 3 miles in the sky, can see a mouse on the ground. We lost the speed of the deer, the strength of the lion. All these things in the way of forming our being, physical being. What we have gained is a mind. None of those have a mind. The animals are instinctive. They may have a formative soul in them. They probably do have a formative soul in them. They cannot think. Their life is only getting food, eating, resting, procreating. No mental consciousness is there. So man has developed this mental consciousness, and he's developed it very, very full. Nolini tells us that it's an ivory tower. You can't go further with the mind. There can be higher stages of mind that we've talked about. Higher mind, illumined mind, intuitive mind, overmind, mind, supermind. We have to graduate to these next levels of mind, and probably that Suram is going to live in that. There are some who already live in the open mind. Some that we have met. One in particular that you have met. So man is ignorant of his high and splendid fate. And we'll carry on a little bit more, because this passage is not so difficult. We're understanding what Sri Aurobindo is telling us.
Yeah.
First, he begins with, too seldom is the shadow of what must come cast in an instant. So this shadow very seldom is cast. Cast, he means thrown at us. When we cast something, we cast it in a fire, if it's bronze or something like that. So too seldom is that shadow of what must come cast in an instance on our secret sense. Our secret sense which feels the shock of the inevitable, and seldom in the few who give answer, the mighty process of the cosmic will communicates its image to our sight. Seldom in the few. So even those few who give answer, who respond to it, there are very few who respond to it, to this mighty process of the cosmic will, which is communicating its image to our sight, the image of things to come, identifying the world's mind with ours. The world's mind is the Supreme's mind, the mind of the world.
Yeah.
It's very powerful. But why does this happen? Because our range is fixed within the crowded arc. And then he goes on to all these things, what we observe, touch, what we can think. And very rarely that light dawns, waking in us the prophet and the seer. Now, there was a lady who I worked with for years, elderly lady in California. Her name was Jyoti Priya, Judith Tyberg, Dr. Judith Tyberg. She was a Sanskrit scholar. When she went before Ramana Maharshi, he looked at her and he said, "You are already a realized soul, but not aware of it yet." She was very young, 17 or so. See, so there are those people among us who have awakened the prophet and the seer. There are some who can see right through us. So then he says the outward and the immediate are our field, and the dead past our background and our support. Yeah, the dead past is our support in a way. Because if we lost the good things of the past, what would we be? We really wouldn't be anything, would we? Without the past that has built this being, we wouldn't be anything.
Yeah.
Okay. So then he continues, and it says the mind keeps the soul prisoner, and our acts. We're slave to our acts.
Right.
We cannot free our gaze to reach wisdom's sun. Yet we are an inheritor of the brief animal mind, the brief animal mind.
Yeah.
Man who is still a child in the hands of mighty nature lives in the succession of the moments. We live from one moment to the next. It's very clear, isn't it?
Yeah.
What will you do 10 minutes from now? Yes, you know. What will you do an hour from now? Well, you have an idea. What will you do tomorrow? Some vague idea. Okay.
Yeah.
And now, the future flees before us. Our memory stares back at a phantom past. Why is it a phantom past? We really can't remember all the details of our past. We have some phantom images of when we were a little child, or our mother, or our father, our relatives, where we lived. It's sort of still it's a phantom past, isn't it? We don't have total recall, so to speak. Okay. Yeah. And then we see imagined garments, not a face. Oh, we covered that. And then we have a precarious strength so that we're able to save our fruits of work from chance, which is always from negative chance, not positive chance, adverse. Our wisdom's mate is the struggling ignorance. And what do? We wait to see the consequence. We wait to weigh the certitude of our thoughts. We know not what we shall achieve. We really don't know what we shall achieve in life or when we shall achieve it. We're ignorant of that. We don't have that vision.
Yeah.
And we don't even know whether we shall survive as humanity now, not individually, but as humanity, or end like the mastodon and the sloth.
Mm-hmm.
perished from the earth where he was king. Well, we know already that there have been Lemurian civilizations, there's been Atlantis,
Yeah.
there's the Incas, all these civilizations passed, and some of them had much greater knowledge than ours,
Yes.
and yet they're gone
Yeah.
because something happened.
Mm-hmm.
They could not evolve
Mm-hmm.
further,
Yeah.
or they went to the dark side.
Mm.
Then he ends, he is ignorant of the meaning of his life. And that's the one thing that we can be so grateful that we know now the meaning of our lives, which is to unite with the divine, become divine, to change this earthly life to a divine life, to live in beauty, in truth, and in love. And then the next time we'll begin with the immortals, because now he changes it.
Yeah.
He tells us what the immortals do.
Yeah.
You did quite well today. Some of the lines were very beautifully read.
Thank you.
So
Okay.
go through this page
Yeah.
a couple more times.
Yeah. Really. Yeah.
And try to feel the key words that link everything.
Okay.
In the back of Savitri, very back, we have Sri Aurobindo's letters on Savitri.
Okay.
I'm just going to read you a little bit about that because they're so important to me anyway.
Is it the note on the text?
No, it's called Letters on Savitri.
I don't have this section.
Ah, yeah. Only some books have it.
Okay, I will listen to you.
He says, how do you know that Savitri is or is going to be supramental poetry? It is not, in fact. It is only an attempt to render into poetry a symbol of things occult and spiritual. But this was in 1933, and he made tremendous inner progress in those 17 years before he left the body. And he says, when they asked him the question, we have been wondering why you should have to write and rewrite your poetry. For instance, Savitri, 10 or 12 times, when you have all the inspiration at your command and do not have to receive it with the difficulty that faces budding yogis like us. Sri Aurobindo answers, very powerful answer. That is very simple. I used Savitri as a means of ascension. I began with it on a certain mental level. Each time I could reach a higher level, I rewrote from that level. Moreover, I was particular. If parts seemed to me to come from any lower levels, I was not satisfied to leave it because it was good poetry. All had to be as far as possible of the same mint. In fact, Savitri has not been regarded by me as a poem to be written and finished, but as a field of experimentation to see how far poetry could be written from one's own yogic consciousness. and how that could be made creative. And then he says, I did not rewrite Rose of God or the sonnets except for 2 or 3 verbal alterations made at the moment. He made 16 drafts of the first canto of Savitri.
Wow, 16 drafts, okay.
He wrote it 16 times until he was satisfied with it.
Okay.
So this tells us so much about Sri Aurobindo. He wasn't writing the poem for poetry's sake. He was writing it to see how far yogic consciousness could cast these experiences of truth in poetry.